Hello folks, and welcome to this week's review. And as ever, if you want to skip around and navigate around this video, go down below into the description. There's a host of chapter headings and you can move around as much as you fancy. Now, CD transports, that's where we are this week. That's what this review consists of, a CD transport. It's from Audiolab. It's called the 9000, not the 6000, the 9000 CDT. It is priced at £1 under 1000 at £999. And I must admit, I like CD transports. Rather, I have grown to like them after hearing how they perform when compared to integrated models. That is, instead of the integrated approach of containing the disk transport and the DAC in one solid chassis, the transport idea separates the two. So you have the disk holding bit, the transport, in one individual box, and then you have the DAC in a separate box over here, and you link the two with a cable of some sort. I tend to use a coax. In short, this allows each section to arrive in a larger chassis, potentially holding better quality components, because you have the space to hold them all. Separating the two parts of the CD player also means you lower the noise floor, because components are not forced to sit cheek by jowl, sharing vibrations and sharing electronic contamination and creating hot, high-frequency noise together. Now, I've said it before, but look, hi-fi is essentially antisocial. The more you separate hi-fi components, the better your hi-fi system will sound. Designers of CD transports know this, and the designer of this transport, a certain Ertner, is a top man in Audiolab. He's the chap who also designed the company's other CD transport, the rather lovely 6000 CDT. So he knows what he's doing. But what about this transport, the 9000 CDT? What does it give you? And what are the differences between it and the lower cost 6000 CDT? Well, at this juncture, I think we need to move a bit, don't you? We need to move over there. Or is it over there? Anyway, wherever it might be, we do need to take a closer look. And welcome to the closer look section for the Audiolab 9000 CDT CD transport. Here is the 9000 CDT, and very nice it looks as well. I have the black version, as you can see here. The 9000 CDT can also be yours in silver. And I was talking differences, wasn't I, before we moved hither and yon? And those differences are pretty significant. Now, the box in front of you includes a brand new transport, the bit that holds and accesses the actual CD disc. That means a new optical system, and that means an end to the 6000 CDT's grab and play loading system. The 9000 CDT reintroduces ye old loading tray. Now, I know that many CD users out there will be happy to see that change, and I can hear them cheering right now. Like the 6000 CDT, the 9000 should also reduce disk reading failures because it includes a built-in read-ahead buffer. This should mean that damaged disks should have a better chance of being read by this transport. And on that subject, I must add that I did not have any issues playing the wide selection of CDs offered to this particular 9000 CDT. Now, while we are inside the box, the motor also has been fitted into its own enclosure with its own power supply. This should help to lower the noise floor. In addition to that, the temperature-controlled master clock also promises lower jitter, but hey, we'll see about that. The construction on the whole is good, very good indeed. In fact, I much preferred the construction of the 9000CDT over the 6000CDT. The 9000 has an aluminium base and chassis, but it does feel stronger than the 6000CDT. The 6000, well, it feels like it was built to a price, and it probably was. That particular transport's casework could feel just a little bit tinny, and if you knock it with your fingertips, you can hear just a little bit of ringing. 9000CDT, on the other hand, feels stronger and better damped, I would say. It's also slightly heavier than the 6000. So let's talk specifics on the 9000, shall we? And let's start at the rear. Now, if you look at the rear of both machines, apart from a little bit of movement in terms of where things actually sit, the rear of both of the transports is almost exactly the same, with one major difference, as we'll see in a second. But from the left on the 9000, we can see a rocker power switch, an IEC power socket just next to it. A little bit further along to the right, we can see some trigger switches for automation, plus that new addition, and that's a USB-A socket, and in there you can plug in some USB sticks to act as an additional source, and you can pack that stick with a heap of digital files to play, and I'll be testing this later on. You also get optical and coax sockets, and I'll be using the coax port to connect to an external DAC, or rather DACs, further in the review. Let's spin this box around now, and let's look at the front of the 9000CDT. What you can see on the far left is a 4.3-inch IPS LCD display. The display shows you all the usual track information, your chosen source, and settings. The settings can be changed in the menu option, and that includes things like your chosen language, how you want to dim this display, and more. You can see that Audiolab has been influenced by its Omnia all-in-one with this screen, and it works well on the 9000CDT. Information is displayed in a large and clear font, and you know what's going on inside by the animated images on the display. These animated images, incidentally, can be disabled if you wish. To the right of that is that CD tray, and the eject button to enable it to spring into action. To the right of that is a rotary knob to select different functions, such as track skip forward and backwards, or if the knob is pressed in, to play and pause your music. Overall, the 9000CDT, well, I would say it looks cleaner than the 6000CDT. The 6000 provides a host of small buttons, and I have to say, when positioned on my particular shady hi-fi shelf, I sometimes forgot what button did what, so I sometimes had to shine my mobile phone torch at it just to remind me what those buttons were. But hey, I have a mind like a goldfish. Hence, until the day that Audiolab go physical VU meters and chunky toggle switches, the 9000CDT's new visual and rather simplified interface is fine with me. Oh, and a rather familiar remote control is also included. So that's the basic tech of the 9000CDT. There's not a great deal to it, and really, for a CD transport, that's how it should be, I reckon. So, how does this thing sound? Well, let's go to the sound quality tests, and we'll find out. And welcome to the sound quality tests for the Audiolab 9000CDT CD transport. And to begin, well, I wanted to establish this machine's credentials as a CD transport. to establish its relative sound position when compared to a standard integrated CD player. I wanted to do an A/B between the two technologies, so I brought in a similarly priced Leema Elements integrated CD player, which is an excellent performer as an integrated design. I can recommend it especially if you're looking for a small footprint model, because it's a half-width CD player. To retain the similar-ish price, I hooked the 9000CDT to a very low-cost DAC, in this case the original issue topping E30 DAC. And that's priced at, oh I don't know, it moves around, doesn't it? Somewhere around £130 or so, meaning the combo for the 9000CDT and the E30 was somewhere around £1,130, or £1,210 if you add, and you must, a connecting cable, in my case a QED coax. The Leema is priced around the 1,450 mark, give or take. Now, I began with the relatively simple Light of Mood track from the future Camel keyboardist Pete Bardens, who is in an Arlo Guthrie Alice's Restaurant kind of mood. This was a rather light-hearted song called Homage to the God of Light, and it was full of acoustic guitars, backing harmonies, lots of secondary percussion, no actual drums, but plenty of cheerful whistling. And the first thing I thought to myself when I started to listen to the 9000CDT, I thought, it's a tambourine. One of those secondary percussion instruments I mentioned, I wasn't too sure if it was a maraca or a tambourine when I was listening to the Leema. The instant extra clarity from the 9000CDT, well, that's clarified that point. So actually, clarity and detail was there in abundance, because I could hear the little bell-like cymbals shaking their little hearts out as the tambourine was being struck. Next, the lower frequencies helped the acoustic guitar sounds, because I could now hear the deep resonance from the same, almost as if you could hear the bass notes from the body of the guitar itself. Speaking of acoustic guitars, I also noted how much firmer were the guitar plucks. The strings sounded substantial. There was meaning behind those guitar movements. Each string sound was notable, significant, instead of just offering a pleasant metallic ting. The 9000CDT gave guitar strings a metallic weight. More than anything else, I was impressed by how each instrument and each voice was placed on the soundstage. The extra focus and precision firmly planted each of these instruments on that soundstage. There was no sense of fuzziness here. Sometimes you can feel that the instruments and the voices are a little ghostly in that they shimmer with some CD players I've heard, and they can sort of smudge in their position, so they're thereabouts, but you're not quite sure. The firm focus from the 9000CDT planted each firmly on the ground in a solid fashion. Next, well, I stayed with Pete Bardens, but I moved more into a rock piece. And, well, this is an obscure early English prog band that Bardens was a member of. This is a band called Village, and they produced one of the largely unknown and yet classic prog singles of all time. It appeared in 1969. It was called Man in the Moon. It was published on the equally obscure Head label. Anyway, it sounds very Steve Hackett, if you know Steve Hackett, in his solo days. It's a beautiful track, and because it's a current favourite, it's on constant rotation. This one features the sublime electric lead guitar I mentioned, bass, piano, Hammond organ, and drums. This time, though, I brought in a similarly priced CD transport from Heed. Now, I've reviewed the Heed on this channel, and I put a little link up yonder, and you can check it out yourself. It is an excellent CD transport on its own. It's highly recommended and well worth the award-winning rating I gave it in that review. Thing is though, when you listen to this prog track on the 9000CDT, well, wow, the amount of space around the mid-range makes that lead guitar sound like it's floating in the clouds. The piano, well, that has a real focus. The notes come at you in a clean and precise fashion. I'm listening to this track through a CD reissue. It's a sort of compilation of Pete Barden's early work. And the master on this CD, it's a new CD, I think it's a bit bright. And that's why I picked it as a review sample. I didn't want the hardware to have an easy ride. But you could hear the 9000CDT lower the high frequency noise on this track. The reduction of the noise floor opened up lots of subtle detail. That was being masked by the bright upper mids, which meant that the Hammond organ crescendos were better represented. I was also impressed with the bass guitar on the 9000CDT, which seemed to sit in a 3D space right at the center where the stereo image lives. This 3D effect added both complexity and a rich character to the music. That is, the music sounded grown up, it sounded mature in character, while the ears were being constantly pulled from one detail highlight to another. Now, to be honest, the Heed offered a better bass response in absolute terms, but like the earlier 6000CDT, the 9000CDT provided a better tonal balance. So the bass from the 9000 was here in abundance. The 9000CDT is certainly not bass light. There's plenty here in the lower frequencies, but the bass integrates itself into the mids and the treble very well indeed, so that each frequency type easily slots together like sonic Lego. Music, therefore, sounds right. It sounds correct. There's a real yin and yang thing here roaming across the soundstage with the 9000CDT. Next, well, there's the elephant in the room, isn't there? There's the subject we've yet to address. There's the big question. Is the 9000CDT any better or worse than the 6000CDT, also from Audiolab? Let me remind you, the 6000CDT is a true, honest-to-goodness giant killer. In my mind, when it was released, goodness knows how many years ago, and hooked to a half-decent DAC via a coax cable, it absolutely decimated every single integrated CD player up to, what, £3,000? And then in walks the 9000CDT. You can just imagine it, can't you? The entire saloon falls silent. The piano player stops playing and looks over his shoulder. The barman hides under the counter. That's the scene I had in my listening room. Only one CD transport was going to walk out of that room. So to provide a level playing field, I maxed out the 6000CDT and I hooked it to my £3 worth of benchmark DAC. To my mind, this is the best quality DAC the 6000CDT can handle before it begins to fall over. Then I ran the 9000CDT in the same configuration, and I played the title track of Mark Knopfler's album, Sailing to Philadelphia. This particular track also features the vocals of James Taylor. Now, this track, it begins with a slow strum of the Knopfler electric guitar. Listening to the 9000CDT, right there and then, I thought to myself, ooh. Now, I've got to say, this wasn't exactly the most insightful or complex critique I've ever delivered in my career. Even so, nevertheless, I have to admit, This was a sound that came from the heart. You see, that strum sounded rich and deep and full of resonance, and only some of that could be heard from the 6000 CDT. Then the Knopfler vocal kicked in, and there it was again, this time a rich and deep delivery. Knopfler's words emerged from the gut, not the throat as the 6000 CDT has it. The 6000 CDT offers a superb tonal balance. So does the 9000 CDT. But the 9000 has more bass to balance in the first place. And it's also better integrated. Now, James Taylor's voice naturally sounded light, a little reedy. I think he can have that quality. There's a bit of the old nasal element to the Taylor voice. But that vocal benefited from a new sense of definition from the 9000 CDT. It added focus. There was extra texture given to that Taylor vocal. There was a new sense of emphasis. Now, all of this chat might lead you to think I'm heading in a particular tonal direction. A warming direction, perhaps? Well, no. Not a bit of it. If you listen to the 9000 CDT's treble, what you hear is akin to the delicacy of the 6000 CDT. You still get the spacious nature from the dynamic reach from those cymbal hits, for example. What the 9000 CDT now adds is weight. Sense of a heavy cymbal being hit is now far more apparent. You don't just get the ting sound from the cymbal, you also get a sense that this is a large piece of metal. So there's a deep tonal response from the cymbal hits that blends beautifully with the treble-based delicacy. And very quickly, before we finish off, I plugged in a USB stick into the rear of the 9000 CDT and I listened to a selection of CD rips, including Billy Joel's My Life, Skunk Anansi's Hedonism, and a bit of pop, Sugar Babe's Stronger. All sounded excellent. Maybe, I don't know, maybe slightly drier in the mids, perhaps, possibly lacking some of the rich qualities heard from the little silver discs from the transport itself. Nothing bad though. I'm actually not criticizing the USB port and the source material it provides. It's perfectly listenable, but maybe the USB source doesn't really thrill in the same way that the CD source does. So how do I conclude this review? Well, let me give you a few final thoughts, then we'll do some pros and cons, and then I'll give you a rating. Let me ask you a question. Have you ever been to a hi-fi show? And if you have you ever visited one of those rooms where it's packed full of expensive hi-fi? And I mean expensive hi-fi. And you've sat in one of these supplied chairs and you've listened to this expensive hi-fi system, valued at many tens of thousands of pounds. And you've thought to yourself, this sounds rather lovely. I wish I could afford it. Well, in many ways, that's how the 9000 CDT sounds. But instead of costing tens of thousands, it costs just under 1,000. And because of that, you feel that this box offers great value for money, for what it does, for the price. It has a luxurious tone, a rich and detailed response, but it's also packed with high frequency elegance, combined with a frequency discipline that refuses to allow any of this information to get out of hand. Now it's this overall balance, this combination of the treble, the mids and the bass, and how each one fits together and how each provides space for each other that makes the 9000CDT sound so mature, so grown up. But if you do grab a 9000CDT, if you want this transport to shine, grab the best DAC you can afford. And not only that, get the best coax cable you can afford. Otherwise, that will become your bottleneck and you'll ruin a brilliant CD transport. Bottom line, well, if you're looking for a new CD player, listen to the 9000CDT first. If you're looking to upgrade from the 6000CDT, listen to the 9000CDT first. If you are building a brand new hi-fi system and you happen to value the little silver disc, then listen to the 9000CDT first. To me, right now, as I say these words, that's where I put the Audiolab 9000CDT CD transport first. So let's talk pros and cons. And in the good section, well, simple design ethic was something that really stood out, as it did with the earlier 6000 model, I must admit. But I was happy to see the 9000 stripped down to its essentials. So there's no Bluetooth included in this one. There's no headphone amplifier. This is just a CD transport. The mid-range offered a rich and focused presentation. There was plenty of clarity in the performance. Tonal balance, how treble and the mid-range and the bass fitted together. Each frequency had enough room to do its job and do it well without being interfered with or bothered in any way by any of the other frequencies. And that bass was finely detailed. It had a true richness. All of these factors and more add up to an award-winning rating, and that's what I'm going to give the 9000CDT. In fact, I'm going to give this one a 9 out of 10, deeply groovy. Congratulations to Audiolab. And that's it, folks. Thank you very much for staying to the end of this review. And as I said to you earlier on, if you dip down into the description, there's a host of chapter headings you can navigate around this video to your heart's content. Before you go, if you can do me a favor, if you can click down there as well, somewhere around there, and click on the like and subscribe button, that would be a real help to this channel. And if you, I don't normally mention this, but there's a little bell thing knocking about. If you click on that, when my videos hit the streets, because that's what they tend to do, because they're rather groovy in that kind of way, if you do hit that bell, YouTube will say, oi, in the manner of digital speaking, oi, it'll say, there's a new video. So it'll give you a nudge. It may be of use. I don't know. Anyway, consider that too, please. And further down in the description, there are all kinds of links to my website, to my Facebook group, and to my Patreon page. Please consider supporting me on Patreon. It keeps this channel going. There's all kinds of exclusives over there, including part 4 of my hi-fi tour, which is exclusive to Patreon. I will be back on Friday with a hi-fi news, etc., with lots of news, of course, plus lots of other fiddly bits. So, I'd love to have your company. Join me then, please. Until then, bye-bye for now.